Hi everyone, this is Bert Copeland with New Life CFO Services. And if you're watching this video, it's because you clicked on the link about learning more about our mission statement. Now, as a recap, our mission statement says that we are here to use our God-given gifts to serve others in a God-honoring way and to be prepared for God-centered conversations when the need arises. Now, you may think that's a little bit odd for a CFO firm, but let me tell you a little bit of background about how we got there. And in fact, the same background is going to explain why I ever created the company in the first place. So it starts in the year 2000 when I was first hired to be the CFO of a $65 million division of a larger company. The company itself did commercial construction. We were a commercial flooring contractor. 3 years after I was hired as a CFO, I was actually promoted to the president of the same division. And 2 years after that, I decided to make the bold step of buying at least part of that company. So out of the total $65 million, I bought the North Texas operations out from the parent, which is about 7 out of the $65 million. And from that, within 3 years, we quickly grew that division from $7 million to $21 million. And then, unfortunately, the Great Recession happened. I remember it vividly because it was March in 2008. And in March of 2008, my monthly revenues were just peaking out at $2 million a month. And that's before we hit the busy season going into the summer. In fact, our projected revenues for April and May were somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5 million, with upward trend going into June, July, and August. Well, we did hit the $2 million for March, which was great. But it was during March when I first started getting a lot of notices from our general contractor saying, hey, you know that job that we're going to start the 1st of April? I need you to tap the brakes and don't come onto the job site. Now, that's not too bad if it's just one GC, but it happened again and again and again. And every time it happened, my panic rate started to get higher and higher and higher. And I'm the type of person that gets into a fight or flight situation, and flight rarely happens. So, of course, I was sharpening up my tonality and calling people going, hey, look, we have a contract, and we're going to be doing that job come hell or high water, and there's no reason that we're not out there. And they go, no, you're still the contractor. You still have the contract. We want you to do the work. We've just been told by the banks to postpone all work until we understand what the underlying collateral value of the building is. I said, fine, not a problem, totally understand. When do you think we'll be back on the job site ready to go? I says, I don't know. I said, well, you're going to have to help me out on that because I literally have a 28,000 square foot warehouse that's primarily filled with product to go on your job, and your job. So what am I supposed to do with that? And they go, I don't know. Because in construction, a lot of times your contract says that you can't bill for the products until they're on site. Now, as I just said a few minutes ago, my revenues in March were $2 million. And I projected that 1.5 million was going to be my revenues for April and May. Unfortunately, it came in a lot less than that. A heck of a lot less. In fact, in April, it came in at $325,000. Now, for y'all that have a calculator in front of you, that's about an 86% drop in revenues that occurred in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. May was a little bit better. That was up to $375,000. Now, here's the real kicker. My break-even point at that time with that company was $825,000 a month. So yes, in those 2 months, I was losing between $350,000 to $400,000 plus a month. In fact, within probably 90 days, I'd burned through well in excess of $1 million. And I'll tell you, when it got into June, I was in full-blown panic mode. The panic was really driven by a couple of things. Obviously, my company wasn't doing well. I was bleeding a boatload of cash. But the other part of the panic was I was a visible member of the business community on lots of boards and all this other stuff. And I was kind of panicking over what was going to happen to my perception, my ego, and everything else. So saying lots of prayers, of course. And I kind of felt that my prayers weren't being answered because nothing was changing. And that led me to take one of the most important meetings and have one of the most important conversations I've ever had. And that was with my pastor, Larry George. So imagine this, I'm sitting in my pastor's office and I'm whining up a storm going, Larry, I don't understand this. I'm a faith-based guy. I'm doing everything that I think I'm supposed to be doing within our Christian lives. And, I'm studying the Bible, I'm reading, I'm praying, I'm giving, I'm doing all that stuff. So why is it when I'm really praying that I'm getting absolutely nothing? And Larry looked at me and he goes, well, first and foremost, Bert, you need to understand that God's not the tooth fairy. I said, what? And he goes, he's not here to magically make your problems go away, but he is here to help you handle your problems in a God-honoring way. So why don't you first tell me about some of the prayers that you're praying? I said, fine. I'm doing the obvious. I'm praying for these problems to go away and for me to get out of this situation before everything collapses and I fire a whole bunch of people, including some of the people that are here at the church that are in my Sunday school class. And he goes, oh, well, that's a pretty normal prayer. So you, Bert, you're praying for God to save you from the situation. I said, exactly. That's it. And he goes, well, I think I know why your prayers aren't being answered. I said, well, why is that? And he goes, because he's already saved you. He's already made the big sacrifice. He's already done that part of your relationship. So if he's already done that, why don't you reconsider what you're praying for? Because, gosh, it's highly likely that God looks at that prayer is already done. What else do you want? That didn't really go over too well with me because I was in this desperate situation. But after leaving Larry's office, it slowly sank into my very thick head that maybe he had a really good point. And so I decided I was going to change the nature of my prayers. And it just so happened at that time, I was reading the book of Ruth. And as you know the story, Ruth and Naomi and her sister-in-law are out in the desert. And through crisis and famine and everything else, they are heading back to Ruth and her sister-in-law's homeland. And halfway in the desert, Naomi goes, I can't do this. I have to go back to my homeland. Y'all go where you're going to go to take care of yourselves, to get married again, and have the families you're going to marry. And Ruth and her sister-in-law made two separate decisions. Now keep in mind that they'd experienced the same thing, they had been on the same road, but obviously they had come to a different realization, learned something different, and they both picked a different path. Because obviously Ruth went back with Naomi, and the rest of biblical history was laid out before them. So I reflected on that and says, you know what? Maybe that's what I need to be praying for. For God just to help me understand what he wants me to learn from this journey that I've been on. And then if he can help me understand what he wants me to learn on this journey, then can he help me understand where he wants me to go next? Is it with Naomi? Do I turn around with Ruth? Wherever. But I think, God, I'll be okay if you'll just tell me what do you want me to learn and where do you want me to go? Sounds pretty simple, really. So back in the day, you'd never know it by looking at me now, but I used to be a big runner. I used to run marathons and half marathons, and every morning I'd get up and go on either a 3, 5, 6 mile run, sometimes longer. But it was late June at this point, and I was out on a morning run, and it was a beautiful morning. And I'd been saying this prayer about what do you want me to learn, where do you want me to go for a week or two. My memory's not all that precise, so give me some flexibility here. And on this morning run, the first part of that prayer about what you want me to learn came to me, it's going to sound weird, it came to me as a loud and clear voice. You left me behind and you're not using my gifts. End of sentence. That's all there was. And I literally stopped running in the middle of the street and I was like, wow, did I just hear that? You're not using my gifts and you left me behind. And I really noodled on that for the upcoming week. And I said, you know what? It's true. I'd made this thing into the Burt Show. And I was a really solid CFO and I'd become something totally different from that. I wasn't making CFO decisions. I was making whatever kind of decisions. But they weren't based on my skills as a CFO. I know that for sure. I said, okay, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, it's the Burt Show and not the God Show. I'm not using my CFO gifts. I'm doing something else. So I said, totally understand, God. That makes perfect sense to me. But I continued with my prayer. Step one was satisfied. What do you want me to learn from this? And I still had nowhere to go. So, and there was a point in time here where I thought my business was totally going to fail. Totally. And so I was still desperate about, where do you want me to go? And so I continued to pray about, where do you want me to go, God? I got the first message loud and clear. So it was another June morning, crystal clear morning, great day to be running. And the second answer to my prayer came about, where do you want me to go? And that was, use my gifts and take me with you. It was the exact same voice. And it was the exact same sentence, only with the twist on it. And like, oh my gosh. The answer was so crystal clear that I could attest its source to be nothing but God. So from that moment on, I said, okay, fine. I'm going to use the gifts you gave me, and I'm going to take you with me on this trip, and we're going to do this together. And so from that point, I went back to my office within the next day, after I'd composed myself, and I witnessed to my entire office. I shared with them my faith, not because I was trying to proselytize or convert everybody, but simply because I needed them to know the basis from which all my decisions were going to be made from that point forward. In fact, I clarified, it's like, now, I'm sharing this with you, not because I want you to suddenly become the biggest Christian in the world, but because I need you to hold me accountable. Because we're going to be making some really tough decisions here together, and those decisions are going to affect my life, your life, and everything else. And if I ever make these decisions, if I ever take actions that are not aligned with living a God-honoring life, that's your trigger to come in and realign me. And my staff took that very seriously. And I'll tell you, it was after that meeting that the miracles started happening in my business. My staff got together and they put together an outstanding reorganization plan. Some of my people demoted themselves into positions they'd been promoted out of the year before because they knew they were the best at that position. For one gal, she demoted herself down from warehouse manager back down to project manager, because in that role she was servicing our biggest and best salesperson, and she did that better than anybody else. She came and made the argument with me about, I can do this better than anybody else. I can serve those salespeople better than anybody else, and you need them focused on sales more than you need them focused on chasing these little bitty pieces of information and coordination all over the company. And shortly thereafter, all those jobs that had been postponed started back up. We had really great order entry. And as we left 2009, and I'll tell you, I lost at least $1 million. If you look at my total net worth, it was probably close to $4 million that I lost in 2008. But in 2009, because of all that work and the direction that God had given me, it was actually our best year ever in 2009. Now, that was, for most people, the heart of the Great Recession. Now, if you set that aside, I still had this feeling about, how am I using my gifts to go and serve others in a God-honoring way? And through a unique opportunity, a strategic competitor came in and arranged to buy my company, and that was a huge blessing to get me out of construction and onto something else. And as that calling kept on knocking on my door, I really sat there and thought, I was like, golly, man, I stepped in a massive bear trap, and I did get out okay, but not too many entrepreneurs have the CFO background I do. And that's when it dawned on me that using my gifts and going out and servicing others, I need to become, I didn't even know the term then, but I need to become a fractional CFO. To go and use my operational CFO gifts to go and serve entrepreneurs in the marketplace to help them run their businesses to achieve their financial goals, but also to make sure they don't step in that bear trap and ruin their whole lives with their financial underpinnings just because of the things they didn't see. Ultimately, that started out with me just hanging out my individual shingle, which I ended up working for a great CPA firm, got hired onto a really large project with a great company. But ultimately, I started my own company saying, you know what? I don't feel like I'm living out the purpose that I've been called to under somebody else's umbrella. And that's when I started New Life CFO Services. Originally, it was just me. It then became me and an analyst if more people became interested in our model. And now we have lots of CFOs and everything else. But our challenge that we do with everybody during our company meetings is, what are we doing to use our God-given gifts to serve others in a God-honoring way, and to make sure that we are ready for God-centered conversation whenever the needs arise. So I hope you've enjoyed this background, And let me tell you, if you're ever out there and you need somebody to talk to because of either great stresses of temptation or duress or whatever the case may be, we're happy to sit down and talk to you, whether that's over business or just over what's going on in life and other things that keep us up at night and keep us from living out the dreams and the goals that God has for you in your lives. With that said, thanks for your time and look forward to seeing you in another deal. Take care.